This is my video interview with Matt Mullenweg, the co-founding developer of WordPress and the CEO of Automattic, where we talk about the future of WordPress. This is a very important time for WordPress users. We are on the eve of a brand new content editing experience inside of WordPress that's going to shape the future of WordPress for the better. We get into all of that and much more in this video. Hi, my name is Adam from WPCrafter.com, where I make WordPress tutorial videos for non-techies. If you're new here, consider clicking on the subscribe button and click on that notification bell if you want to know when I've uploaded new videos. So let's not waste any time. Let's just jump right on into the interview. Today's a special treat here on the WP Crafter channel. In fact, today's actually the first time I've ever had a live interview, and I just shot straight for the top and reached out to Matt Mullenweg, who is the co-founding developer. Is that the right way of saying it? The co-founding developer of WordPress and the founder of Automattic. Did I get that right?
That is a correct way to put it. Yeah.
Okay, I wanted to make sure I got that exactly right. So, we're going to just go through some questions here, and I wanted to use this time to, of course, we're going to talk about Gutenberg, and we're going to talk about this new content editing experience, and we're also going to talk about WordCamp US, which is right around the corner, just a few days away, and we're lucky to have Matt today because he's going to have this massive event in just a few days, and he's taking time out of his schedule to come here on the channel. So, the first thing I wanted to do is see if we could just go back to 2003 when you were part of this release of WordPress and coming up with it. Like, what problem did you think that WordPress was going to solve when you created it and put all that effort and energy to release it?
That's a good question. I would say that quite modest. We were wanting to, I was wanting to have better software for my website. I was blogging at the time. I was using and contributing to software called B2 Cafe Log and wanted to see it develop and continue to improve. So started working on it with the other co-founding developer, a fellow in the UK named Mike Little. And from the very early on, we tried to have a point of view and really have strong opinions on things like web standards and the usability of the software. So much so even that we were, naming releases after jazz musicians and having taglines like "Code is poetry." Like, this is all kind of a combination of things that was different than some of the other software at the time, and I'm excited to be continuing many of those traditions today.
So, when you released it, I'm sure you might not have at that time really saw what you were doing and what would end up happening. Obviously, 15 years fast forward, and it's had a massive impact on millions of people's lives all around the world, and of course, a big impact on the internet. But when did you look at WordPress and say, wow, we might be onto something here? I know you started Automattic in, was it 2005? Was that when you really thought, man, there could be really something big going on here with WordPress?
Even then, WordPress was pretty modest in its adoption. I would say that I am continually surprised, delighted, and feel the responsibility of WordPress's adoption at every stage. So, first couple of users were just my friends. We had more users than developers. And so I was kind of like coercing people to try it out. And then, but at every stage where it was 10,000 users, 100,000 users, or now to where we're at, which is about 32% of the top 10 million websites, I am humbled and honored to be part of it.
So would there be something that you would attribute the growth of WordPress to? I know for me, I was an early smartphone user. I had a Palm Pilot. Yes, I'm that old. I had a Palm Pilot. I had all of these different smartphones. But when the iPhone came out, it was nice. But then they added an app store, and that was really kind of what I think catapulted the iPhone's adoption. What would you consider like what caused WordPress to really take off? And I'll tell you, I have a background. I used some of the other content systems back then. I had Mambo, I think it was called, and then it forked and became Joomla. And then later in 2008, I used WordPress. But what would you consider maybe some of those things that just happened right in order to accelerate WordPress and make it what it is today, the wide adoption that it has?
I really attribute it to two things. We've been very user-focused from the very beginning. And that sounds obvious, but you'd be surprised by how many discussions, including ones that happen in WordPress on track tickets and GitHub issues today, can be a lot more. It's easy to forget the end user in mind and really consider the audience of people using and dealing with something that aren't going to be represented in the conversations that are happening. And the second is, I would say, we've always thought very long term. So we make moves today thinking where it's going to be 5, 10, 15 years from now, which was kind of ridiculous when we were very small and young. And most software projects, including open source projects, don't last longer than a year or two. But now I think we're really starting to see, WordPress's market adoption is literally 10 times the runner-up. So we're seeing the results of some of that long-term thinking. And I'm excited that investments that we started making 3 or 4 years ago that aren't even on the radar of some of our proprietary competitors are really going to start paying off in the coming years. And so we're continually doing that. We're starting things today that I don't think will pay off until 2022.
Gutenberg, a new content editing experience, right? Which we'll get to in a moment. But, I have a question, a personal question that I wanted to ask you about WordPress, and that over the years, I've used a lot of open source software. I know my YouTube channel, I say WordPress for non-techies, but I'm a very techie kind of guy. So I've used so many different open source tools, software, and whatever. And I've noticed that with a lot of open source projects, they'll start open source and then a parent company gets formed and comes in and will only build the polish and the features that people want for the open source project on like a commercial version, you know what I mean? Where they're trying to shift the user adoption to from the free version to some kind of a commercial version that they're only improving now, and they kind of leave the open source version in the dust just to try to, it's almost like it was a marketing trick, you know what I mean? A marketing trick to get people to use this great free thing and then move them to some kind of monetization model. But you haven't done that with WordPress, and I'm actually very impressed by that. And is that because of values that you have when it comes to open source? Because I know you're like a big believer in open source, and I think keeping it open source. And obviously this question can feed into Gutenberg because you didn't just make that for WordPress.com users. That's being put out into the open source version. What's been like your guiding way of thinking about this, because you haven't gone the way that all these other tools have seemed to go?
Yeah, it's funny. When Automattic, which is my for-profit company, started, people were very rightly concerned for exactly the reasons that you said. We now have 13 years of history of Automattic coexisting with the open source side of WordPress. And I would say highly complimenting. I think WordPress is bigger than it would have been had Automattic not exist. People are still concerned about the over commercialization of WordPress from Automattic today. So I don't think it's something that ever goes away. But I do hope that as we show longer and longer periods of time where, particularly myself as the CEO of Automattic and the steward of the WordPress open source project, I try to think long term. So I think that when companies do what you describe, which is, let's say compromising the free or open source user experience or developer experience to try to feed into a commercial entity, they're optimizing for short-term profits over long-term growth. And if you have the luxury and flexibility, as Automattic does, to really invest and think in the long term, you end up with something that looks a lot like the dynamic between WordPress, Automattic, and the broader WordPress ecosystem, which comprises probably over $10 billion a year at this point of commercial activity.
That's... You're right there with the concept of short-term thinking, because if you probably would have done that, say, in 2005 or 2006, WordPress probably wouldn't have the market share that it would have today, where now, 32%, it keeps going up a little bit. It's probably harder and harder to get market share now, right? But you probably would have never even got to this point if that was the direction you chose. And so I guess that would feed off into another question. If you were to, retire from Automattic in the future, is there like things in place to safeguard against that, switching to a model like that?
Sure. Well, two things. One, the market share adoption of WordPress is actually accelerating. So we are now growing faster than we did when we were smaller, which again is highly, highly unusual in open source or even commercial software that reaches the levels that we continue to. I think this is a reflection of the ecosystem, the flywheel effect, that sort of great software, user-centric software, long-term thinking, and this wider called ecosystem of plugin, themes, service providers, channel distributions, hosts, agencies, everything that kind of feeds into making WordPress better, including awesome YouTube channels like this one. So thank you for that contribution.
Yeah, it's been definitely fun making these videos for people, for sure.
I might have lost your question though. Where were
That's
we?
okay. I was just adding, is there like some safeguards in place? So obviously you can't be at the helm of Automattic forever. There's going to be some time where you move on and do something else. You see that with all the tech companies where the founder eventually moves on into something else. Is there like some safeguards in place to see if a new CEO was to go in there and lead Automattic, that they wouldn't try to do this shift to monetize it more heavily? I don't really feel like WordPress or Automattic really monetizes WordPress that much. It's just these auxiliary services that make it a better experience. Although that might lead into some talk about Gutenberg and Jetpack and the Gutenberg modules that are starting to come in there as like more of an essential plugin for WordPress. But that's okay. We can.
Sure. No, we covered some areas, but I can try to address them.
Yeah.
So first, I'll say that I've been doing WordPress for 15 years. My enthusiasm is even higher than when I started, and I hope to continue to work on WordPress the rest of my life. It really is my life's work, and that is my life plan. Now, if for whatever reason my life plan did not execute over the period which I hope it will, which is many decades to come, I've tried to set up the structures with the WordPress core, the WordPress foundation, the economic incentives of Automattic, that even in absence of a benevolent leader, which is perhaps, presumptive of me to assume that I am one, but if someone were to come in with like devil horns and like want to do evil things as a leader of Automattic, the sort of structures in place would make that difficult or actually not logical. So Automattic is structured in a way that it very much benefits from the wider WordPress ecosystem. Jetpack, what you mentioned, is a great example of this. The vast majority of value in the WordPress ecosystem is captured by people providing the hosting. And WordPress.com is a host, and it is also Automattic's largest business. However, I never wanted the sole opportunity for Automattic to be only for people that we happened to pay for hosting from us, because obviously many other hosts, from GoDaddy to Bluehost to every other WordPress host in the world, WP Engine, is a key part of many people's experience for WordPress. So that's why we created Jetpack. It essentially creates a way for Automattic to be economically aligned with the host and the people running WordPress everywhere else, whether that's on a cloud service or a different host or anything, and not have, essentially align the incentives. And ultimately, in the long term, incentives are what matter. So I think about that a lot and work on that a lot.
So let's shift the conversation to really the main topic around WordPress for the last 2 years, and that's the new content editing experience, Gutenberg. And I just want to ask you, see, on this channel, we're mostly users and implementers with WordPress and delivering WordPress solutions, using WordPress for ourselves. So we're mostly the users, and so we're very close to that user experience of WordPress. I was just wondering, what made you, and I'm assuming it would be you, what made you look at WordPress and say, there's this content editing experience. We need to change it. We need to do something different. What made you look at it and say that to yourself, or is that what you said? Like, why Gutenberg? I guess is what I'm trying to get to.
Well, I'm not that smart, but I do try to listen, and there have been numerous developers talking about the need for a more structured approach to WordPress content development for a long time. And the thing that humbles you the most is watching these user tests. And how many times have you seen someone insert an image and it gets kind of jangled, or an embed messes up their post, or the HTML, prior to recent releases, is even very difficult to choose what text went inside or outside of a link or other inline elements without going to code view. And for the people, probably this audience, that is pretty familiar with WordPress, and certainly for myself, I began to just take note and be aware of how many times I was switching into code view out of the visual editor. Even though I was primarily writing the visual editor, I would get something that just needed a tweak, or kind of backed myself into a corner I couldn't get out of. And because I'm fluent in HTML, I never thought about it, because I was switching back and forth. And that was, in fact, part of helping create the feature that made it easy to switch back and forth with those tabs. But I began to really think that every time I do this, what's easy for me, and probably the people watching this podcast, to switch into HTML or CSS, represents sometimes an impenetrable wall for a less savvy user. And what for me might be even a few seconds of going in and out of HTML might be 5 or 6 hours of Googling and trying to understand the basics of markup languages and things for a less savvy user. WordPress's mission is to democratize publishing, which means we want to make it accessible to everyone, regardless of language, regardless of income, our economic ability, and also regardless of technical ability. So Gutenberg is very much the response to what people have been struggling with WordPress for the better part of a decade. And it's just now that both the technology platforms have caught up, meaning what we are able to accomplish in modern browsers and JavaScript, we've caught up, so we've gotten better at developing. And we're able to truly address these fairly sophisticated user needs to make something that's incredibly powerful, also intuitive and easy to use.
So, did you, how did you, well, here, I'll give you an example. I recently released a product, and before we released it, it's named Cart Flows. It sits on top of WordPress and WooCommerce. And before we released it, cool. What we did was we gave it to people that had never used it before. And we said, we want you to open up your screen recorder, turn on your microphone, and just use it, and use it for an hour and just try to figure it out, and just narrate that process. And I remember sitting there the day before we released it, and I'm watching all of these videos, and I'm like, oh my gosh, we got to change this. We got to change this. We got to change this. It needs to be
so humbling.
Oh my gosh. So here's the day before. I should be creating some tutorials for it. I should be creating some copy, some emails for the launch of it. But instead, I'm listening to the users. I'm watching what they're doing, and I'm learning through their eyes. And it was probably the most impactful experience for me. How did you guys do that? Did you, are you saying maybe, I'm sure you have family and you meet people all the time that might have never heard of WordPress, and you're like, oh yeah, I started this little thing called WordPress, and then you might show it to them. Is that how you saw how people used it, or is it just listening to the community, or did you actually see it with your own eyes? Because I would agree with you that the current editor, I have to go into code view all the time as well. Typically, when I hit enter and now things are bolded wrong, and there's bullet points are wrong, and numbered lists are wrong. How did you actually discover that? Were you watching people using it yourself, or was it just listening?
Really all of the above. So I've certainly been exactly in your shoes when you talked about being very close to release and finding all these issues. So what we do now is we try to do that type of testing as early on in the process. And Gutenberg has been under active development for just about 2 years now. And literally from those very first versions, we've done those user tests where people try to do something on a screen and they're talking in a microphone kind of like this. And you see everything. So while the most visible feature of Gutenberg is these new blocks, we fixed hundreds of those micro interactions as well that sort of move you in and out of inline elements or lists or images or positioning or columns or any of these things. So even if you just write posts exactly like you used to before, and Gutenberg is a lot more robust. And with the block metaphor, if you utilize them, you'll be able to create things you could never create in the prior WYSIWYG editor. It would be literally impossible to. So I highly encourage that for anyone who's listening to this and I get it through anecdotal ways. Like I do tech support at least a week or two per year. I go to WordCamps, I go to meetups, I listen to people, I respond to comments, I read the reviews of Gutenberg, I like kind of everything. I follow Twitter, people tweeting at WordPress, like as many inputs as possible. But if you complement that with a more structured thing, a usability test really is what that is when you ask someone to accomplish a task and record them doing it, you will create software that's ahead of 80% of what's in the market, to be honest. It's relatively simple, but most people developing it just don't do it.
And it's that one extra step that really takes something that just works to make it something that is amazing for the user. Because ultimately, well, one thing I discovered in this process, I'm not a product developer or anything like that, I'm more an idea guy, is that the hardest thing to accomplish is to make something simple. After you've done it, so in Gutenberg right now, this whole concept of blocks and assembling your content, it looks real simple, but I'm sure it was really hard to make something simple for you guys. Who came up with the idea of breaking it down into blocks? Was that some insight that you had or someone on the team?
Everything is a team effort, so I won't take credit for anything. I've been wanting to have a block-based editor. I think I first showed something in maybe the 2013 State of the Word. But to me, it's very natural when you think of the structure of HTML to not pretend that these sort of underlying elements behind the scenes, to pretend they don't exist as many WYSIWYGs do, I think actually creates more complexity for the user because there's hidden elements which are impacting where things are positioned or laid out. So although Gutenberg appears like it has more sort of things going on visually, really all we're doing is exposing what previously was invisible and probably frustrating you in unknown ways. And so by making it more visible, it counterintuitively can make it simpler. There's also, certainly other CMSs and other people that have some prior art for essentially exposing these blocks, allowing them to be directly manipulated. I would say even going back to Front Page and Dreamweaver in the early 2000s, which are my first exposures to HTML. A lot of what we're trying to do isn't new. We're just trying to do it in a new way. We're trying to say using the best and most modern technologies available today, using how people are publishing and using the web, what is the experience which is both more intuitive for new users and more powerful for experienced users. And this is a point in time. 5.0 represents the best that we've been able to create so far. And I think that a year from now, we'll look back and say, well, we can do so much better, and we have. So software, if you're not embarrassed when you look at your old versions of software, you're not developing enough. You're not improving.
It was for me, it was like a home run last year when you guys did the demonstration of Gutenberg at the WordCamp, because just prior to that, I had gone through a rebranding process of WPCrafter, and I made my logo the letter C. And if you look at it, it's a series of blocks, and the last block is being laid in. And I'm like, oh, this actually works out perfect. I already had this block idea. WordPress is going to be all about blocks, but actually for me, it was the blocks weren't Gutenberg. It was the different plugins that you might add to your WordPress website to build something amazing for yourself. That was more the blocks, and just the concept is showing people how to assemble the blocks to build something for themselves. Name comes from the video game Minecraft. My son was really into it at the time. So it's not crafting with scissors, it's that. So, so in my opinion, and I'm sure it's not just my opinion, Gutenberg and this new content editing experience is probably the most significant change to ever come to WordPress, right? I mean, it's a big, like, tectonic shift. And did you kind of expect the current reaction that you've seen over the last year and a half? And you obviously said that you go on, you've read the reviews that people have left. Is that something that you anticipated or expected when the decision was to go in this direction?
Yeah. I mean, I've been doing this for 15 years now, and I would say any large change, certainly at the scale of Gutenberg, I knew there would be pushback and there'd be controversy and a lot of resistance to the change, which I think is very, very natural because we've been, including myself, have been doing the old way of doing things for over a decade. So anything that changes that, I think there's a very natural kind of fear, uncertainty, doubt about what's on the other side of the unknown. What I didn't anticipate was the adoption that Gutenberg would get even prior to the official release. So early on, probably over a year ago, I said that, and I thought these were ridiculous, like moonshot goals. I said I'd love to get 100,000 sites using Gutenberg and 250,000 posts. Where we are today is, I think, 1.2 million sites using Gutenberg and over 1 million posts. So, and the post number is actually just a small subset of the active sites numbers. So, racking the post from I think 400,000 or 500,000 of those active sites. So the real post number is probably 5 million plus. That has blown me away. And I think it shows the kind of need for this in the market, that people really, really want this, which can also be demonstrated by the large number of WordPress users using page builders and other things that extend WordPress into a block interface like, say, Elementor or Beaver Builder. So, yeah, I didn't anticipate that. It's been really great, though, for the robustness of the software. Bugs that normally we would pick up after a major release, we've been catching prior to it. So I'm very excited about 5.0 being one of the most robust and stable releases we've done in many years.
So, part of the reaction is, and actually those stats are really impressive with Gutenberg. I will let you know, on my main website, I started using it maybe 4 months ago. Like, I put it on the live website, not in a development environment, and it's actually been great. I've enjoyed it, and I have some content writers, and I set them up with it, and that's why I made a video like 4 months ago. I called Gutenberg for Content Writers. It was like a training video for the content writers, so they would understand Gutenberg and how to work in the new content editor as they're writing content for me. But back to some of the criticism. What is there anything you would attribute just the criticism portion towards Gutenberg to? And I think what I've seen a shift from the users on my channel, from people that initially were not excited or happy about this and what it would mean for them. But then when they would actually use it, I saw this shift begin to happen. So is there anything that you would maybe attribute some of this criticism, maybe some fair, maybe some a little extreme or unfair, anything that you would attribute it to?
Passion, which is fantastic. I would rather people be passionate about WordPress, and that will reflect itself in praise and criticism, than be apathetic. And so the day I'll worry is when we do something as big as Gutenberg and no one comments or no one cares. In terms of, critical feedback is part of what makes WordPress better. And one thing that I practice and try to coach and all the other lead developers and people in leadership and open source is to say, however the feedback is delivered, even if it is not in the most polite or balanced or way, try to extract out what the nugget is that's making that person feel that way. assuming that they're not just making things up. It is a reflection of their emotional states, their feelings, their thoughts. And so, try to dig in, try to understand it, and then incorporate that into future iterations or how you try to talk and address. But you're right that you can only talk about things for so long. And I am personally excited about 5.0 actually being out in the wild, because all the hypotheticals that people are worried about one thing happening or another thing happening, we'll be able to deal with reality and see what's actually happening in terms of adoption, in terms of bugs, in terms of really everything out there. All of the data, why do we have the confidence to try to release on December 6th? Because all the data that we've seen thus far and all the prior experience with every prior WordPress release indicates that this is in a good state where it's ready for wider use. And we've created a very prominent and easy path for people who want to upgrade to 5.0 but aren't ready for Gutenberg yet. We have been promoting since August a classic editor plugin that keeps you on the older editor, and that will continue to be promoted when you upgrade to 5.0 and even after you're on 5.0. So for anyone, for whatever reason, who doesn't want to use the block editor, they can still use the existing editor, which is essentially WordPress as it's worked for the past decade. We even committed to supporting this classic experience through 2022, which I can't think of the last time we've done that in core WordPress. So we really are we recognize that this is a big evolution of WordPress, and that we're trying to recognize that and give people choice for how they want to adopt it. And I would say that's very, very core to get back to your why has WordPress been successful, is that we do give users control and choice. And Gutenberg doesn't change that. It is a reflection of what myself and the other leads of WordPress think is the best default experience for new and existing users. But that's the beauty of WordPress, is you don't have to use the defaults. You can use plugins or themes or custom code that modifies literally every single line. That's where WordPress is different from SaaS services or anything else. Like if Google or Facebook release an update and you don't like it, you're stuck with it. If Apple updates and you don't like it, you're stuck with it. With WordPress, we're going to release 5.0, but if you don't like it, you can change it. And there's already dozens of plugins that customize it in every possible way you can imagine. And that's not changing. That's not going away. It's very core to the WordPress philosophy now and really forever in the future. It's the beauty of open source.
I love that you said that passion. You know what I mean? WordPress users and the developer community, it's a passionate bunch, and it's better to have this passion than to not have any passion at all about what you're doing, to invoke some kind of a feeling in people. I think it's awesome. And to the subscribers here on the channel, I did a test.
Kanye West line?
What's that?
Do you know the Kanye West line where he says, people talk so much about me in barbershops, they forget to get their hair cut? I feel like Gutenberg is kind of like that.
Well, yeah, you're doing, I think Gutenberg is something remarkable, which essentially means it's worthy of remark. It's a really remarkable thing that's happening in this shift, in this new way of adding content. I'm going to drill you on what's the future of this new content editing experiences outside of just editing content. But you definitely have some passionate users. I wanted to tell people yesterday, or even tell you, yesterday I installed the latest release candidate of WordPress version 5. And whenever there's a major release of WordPress, well, first of all, updating is optional. It's not going to automatically happen. But when you do update it, it takes you to that kind of like an onboarding welcome, what has changed. And when you scroll through that, there's a button there that says, hey, if you don't want this new content editing experience, click this one button and you can have the classic editor. Like, it's literally right there. It's not like something that you have to start using. And when you start using the new content editor on your website, all the prior content you've created goes into this classic editor block. So there is no, you're forced into using Gutenberg, and you have the opt-out option right then and there if you're not ready. And it's understandable that some people might not be ready. But one of the things I wanted to ask you is, seeing as how, my opinion, this is the biggest shift, is there anything now, hindsight is 2020, right? Is that how it is? Anyways, is there anything
Mhm.
that you would look back and say, maybe we could have done this a little differently or that a little differently on how we, just started going down this path in the public sense?
There's two big things that we definitely learned from. Um, the first was early on in the beta process. We basically we announced that there was going to be an accessibility audit, but it wasn't actually kind of set up. And what's happening, it's happening now, but how it looked like from the outside was that audit was announced and then canceled, which made people perceive that WordPress or lead developers or myself don't care about accessibility, when in fact the opposite is true. So that was definitely an unforced error that I completely understand why people got that perception, and it is completely the literal opposite of what we want and how we develop WordPress. The second was, this is again a mistake where the core developer team was really trying to polish this as much as possible. And so usually as we get into betas and release candidates, we put a much tighter clamp on the code changes. So we're really doing only high priority, high severity fixes, and really reviewing them quite a bit. And what happened is the team was was trying to just get things in there that seemed like improvements, and they were. But sometimes, as you know, when you change code, there can be unintended side effects. So there were some improvements aimed at fairly minor issues that ended up creating a bigger bug. And that was sort of the famous, you might have heard, like the white screen bug for ACF in one of the betas. Like, it was fixed within hours, but the fact it happened the first really shook people's confidence. And again, it was one of these things that was a couple line change. So one thing we learned since then, and will continue in the future, is really being much more intentional and really keeping a pretty firm line about what comes in, what code changes come into the beta once we declare beta. And we can still make bigger changes in a different channel, like an alpha channel or a trunk channel. But for beta and release candidates, it needs to be pretty tightly held to just give the code the most time in the testing period before release. So that's part of why we had to push back the release a few weeks, and why essentially over the past few weeks since release candidate, the code's been effectively frozen. You can count the number of lines changed on kind of your hands and toes, and it's minor and high severity things.
So if this is totally off script of what I wanted to ask you, is there any? So okay, yesterday it was announced that December 6th is the day. Is there any like nervousness? I mean, I know when I recently launched this product, it was November 19th, and I couldn't sleep November 18th. You know what I mean? I was pretty nervous about it. What is going to happen tomorrow? A lot of things happened that day, but there was a nervousness in me. Is there any nervousness in you? Or, I mean, you're kind of battle tested. You've been doing this for 15 years.
Yeah, I think this is maybe the 38th, or I forget exactly what number, but definitely more than 30 releases I've been a part of. So there is some element of it that the more you do it, the more you see that things aren't necessarily new. It's patterns that repeat themselves, including sometimes people being very, very worried about the release that's going to come out. And the bigger the change is, the more worried people are. The best analogies I have from prior experience to look at this was there was once in the past where we had a year between releases. And we actually at that time said we'd never do it again, which is funny because this is 2 years between releases, between 4.9 and 5.0. But the longer you go between a release, the more that kind of builds up and the more anxiety there is when you do the next one. And I'm very much looking forward to, after 5.0, getting back on a regular release chain or train, and perhaps even accelerating the major releases from the 3 major ones that we've done for many prior years. So maybe even getting to where we can do 4, 5, 6, maybe even 12 major releases per year, to the point where you don't think of what version of WordPress you're using. You're just using that version of WordPress, just like you don't think of what version of Chrome you're using. You just log in and you're on that day's Chrome.
That's very true.
Other
Yeah.
analogies when when we first introduced WYSIWYG. So this is maybe hard to remember, but WordPress used to not have any visual editor. And introducing it based on TinyMC at the time was highly controversial. And I would say had many of the same tone, tenor, controversy, arguments, worries that we're seeing today. And so it makes sense because writing and editing is really, if you were to pick one thing that's really key to WordPress, it's that. And it's why it's really hard to change. And people get nervous when we change it. So, but that experience for the prior one makes actual release days are pretty anticlimactic because you're not writing new code. You're not trying new things. You're just pushing a button on something that's been stable and in the wild for, in the case of Gutenberg, 2 years. So it is exciting, and I definitely celebrate that evening. But the night before, I sleep pretty well.
Well, you're going to need to sleep pretty well the night before because you have your big, WordCamp US, which is, what is it? It starts Friday or it starts the Saturday?
It starts on Friday this year, and
So
then I'll deliver
Friday,
my
the
State
day
of the Word
of
on Saturday.
the 6th.
That's the 7th. So Friday's the 7th.
Oh. I should know that. My birthday's the 7th anyway.
Happy birthday.
That's why I never make it to WordCamp US. I have a family, right? That want to see me for my birthday. Hey, so I want to try to get a little bit of information out of you about the future of this new content editing experience, because I think for me, it would be naive to think that this is just a new content editor. There's going to be definitely more to come. And I know for me, when it really clicked for me, Gutenberg and this new content editing experience is about 2 months ago. Some of the theme developers are now starting to add integration. And what that means is, and the first theme I tried was the Astra theme, which is the #2 non-WordPress developed theme in the repo right now. And they were one of the first to release their Gutenberg integration, and logging in, creating a new post, and seeing my font there, seeing my spacing there, seeing my font sizes, seeing pretty close to how it would actually look on the front end. It really started to click for me that this is something exciting. This is maybe more than meets the eye to this. And I want to twist your arm, a virtual arm twist. And, what does this mean for WordPress? And kind of what I wanted to title this video anyway was the future of WordPress. What does this mean a year and a half, 2 years into the future? What are you willing to share today with the people watching of what this means for tomorrow?
Well, as an open source community, we try to share things at the same time to everyone. So what we're currently in is releasing phase 1 of Gutenberg. We've already announced phase 2. I will expand on this on Saturday, but it's already public. So basically, what we're doing is we're taking Gutenberg works within the post content area, right? So it's about post and pages. But we want to expand the block concept to cover things outside of post and pages. So sidebars, headers, footers, which are essentially just like reusable templates in Gutenberg. But right now have a variety of different interfaces, code paths, and things to interact with them. Now, since you have a savvier audience, I can put it this way. In the past, WordPress has had a bunch of different things that had different data and interaction models that you'd use to create your site. You'd have themes, you'd have plugins, you'd have widgets, sidebars, menus, shortcodes, embeds, and then you just have arbitrary HTML, meta fields, custom fields. Blocks are a fundamental concept that can unify all of these. So if you think of any of those, what are widgets, but just blocks in your sidebar? What are embeds or shortcodes? But just a shortcode is basically a bad interface for a block. So as all of these get upgraded to essentially have block interfaces, they will become things that you can both visually interact with, move around, put in columns, and start to use in and outside of the post content area. So a common newbie question for WordPress is, there's this, let's say there's a widget like the recent post widgets. How do I put that inside a page? I want to put that on my about page. below my picture and above the paragraph about my bio. Like, can you imagine trying to explain that to a new WordPress user today?
Oh, I know, because I get the questions. I field 150 to 100 questions per day, and I field questions like that all the time. You're absolutely right.
I mean, if there were a gun to my head and I was telling someone how to put a recent post widgets inside a post, I would probably have to tell them to go to like one of the posts that lets you execute PHP inside the post content, which is terrifying. And then walk them through going to code view and putting in the PHP that would call that particular widget in between the code for their image and the code for their paragraph. And there are so many places there where that could go wrong. And then even the fact that you're executing PHP in the post content is dangerous in and of itself. Post Gutenberg, you just say, hey, you click the plus button to add a block, or tip for pro users, press the // which opens up the block with the search already collected. So you can just type in, click plus, look for recent post, and then add it. And then you can customize all the options for it, which previously you'd have to use PHP code for, including number of posts, display, whether to show thumbnails or not, all those featured images or not, all those things, just right there in a visual way, and it'll be previewed. And if you want to move it around, you can just click a few buttons and do so. That is kind of the shift that we're taking for granted a little bit, but what's going to be possible post Gutenberg, and is literally impossible without using a bunch of plugins or custom code today in WordPress. So it really opens up the possibilities, and I fully expect there to be, I've put it as a Cambrian explosion of blocks occurring for WordPress, and all the action's going to be in blocks. So we'll probably even talk about themes and plugins and everything less, and just really talk about cool blocks.
And you already see this happening. Smart developers are totally already on top of this. I was 2 days ago testing one of the block plugins called Ultimate Add-ons for Gutenberg, and it's really impressive that you can now, like what you're able to do now with the block interface. And that was a great example of trying to add related posts. It's just not going to happen, and you can't. There's just so many more opportunities for a user to simply, in an understandable way, make their content look how they want it to look and make it do what they want it to do with these blocks. And it's not limited to pages. You can also, where a lot of the writing happens is on posts. You can do some impressive things there to break up long bits of text and make it easier to consume and do some amazing things. So great work there. Well, I only have a couple more questions for you.
Customization. So phase 2 is all about customization and basic things that today are hard or done differently in every theme. Like, let's say under a post showing a bio or an author or not, or categories or tags, like everything implements those options differently will now be standard and have a single interface. There are phases 3 and 4 of Gutenberg already planned, and I will be announcing them for the first time at State of the Word on Saturday. You're watching YouTube right now, so there will be a free live stream. So you just have to sign up for a ticket at the WordCamp United States site, WordCamp US. You can Google it. And I believe it's 4 p.m. Nashville time, be announcing all the stuff to the world. So announcing phases 3 and 4, and also showing lots of really cool examples of what you can do with Gutenberg blocks.
So we're going to know the full answer to the question that I asked you. We're going to know 3 and 4, and that, I'm assuming that's going to be kind of like a head spinner, right? Like, wow. Now, it's like, yeah, and I know this when I keep going back to this my own personal example of releasing a product, cart flows, and I know what the overall vision is, right? I know what we're releasing now. I know what the plan is for the future, and I know what this thing's going to look like down the road. But the people that are in the public and looking at the product, they don't know what they don't know. They don't know all of these things that this tool is going to end up becoming. And I imagine there's a bit of the same sentiment with Gutenberg and this new content editing experience. We don't really know what we don't know. Only you know, and certain people on your team, and you're keeping your cards really close to your chest, which is totally understandable. So, but you're saying for anyone that's listening now, they can hop on that free live stream of the State of the Word, which is you sitting there and basically saying, is it going to be the full vision of what this is going to mean for WordPress? Or is there stages 5, 6, and 7 that are in the back of your mind?
Well, and I also don't want people to think that I have some sort of secret plan. Um,
So
I
yeah.
announced this originally in 2016, and we're 2/3 through a 3-year roadmap. So phase one took about 2 years. Phase three will take most of next year's. What I'm going to announce on Saturday is things that we can start in 2019, and then will hopefully take us through 2022. So it's a long-term roadmap. So we're pretty far ahead of it.
Well, and part of it, don't you? I mean, you're in a business, the Automattic side, and keeping WordPress. I mean, there's competition out there. You start revealing all your cards, what you're planning in 3 years. Other platforms say, "Hey, that's a great idea. I didn't think about it. Let me implement it in 6 months." And then now you're basically creating your competition. WordPress doesn't really
I
have
don't
that
worry
much.
too
It's
much
almost
about
like
that.
too big to fail, like a bank. You know what I mean? Our U.S. banks, it's almost too big to fail. But that doesn't play into it, I'm assuming.
Now, competition is going to do that regardless of whether we announce publicly or not. And so I find that the benefits to the community of having a pretty clear roadmap laid out years in advance outweigh the fact that your competitors also know what's coming. Because to be honest, a lot of this is user driven. So you can look at your competition, but you can also just listen to your users, including you can do user tests for competitors' products, and they'll tell you exactly what you need to do. And that's really what determines our roadmap.
That's so true. I only have a couple more questions that I'm going to have to ask you because of this channel. So the
Sure.
WP Crafter channel, most, if not all of the viewers, millions of people watch these videos every single year. Uh, they're all page builder users. Okay. So we were, I think that was probably what attributed the growth of my channel is this concept of a page builder. And what a page builder allows you to do is create something yourself that you couldn't really do before there was page building tools. You were reduced to like code, or some themes tried to do a bunch of stuff with widgets. There was just more complications, and page builders really made it a lot easier. And if you look at the growth of page builders, it's kind of goes in line with the growth of a lot of these YouTube channels, including mine
Totally.
right here. When you first started, when the talk first started about Gutenberg, I was talking to Morten Henriksen, Morten,
Mhm.
and he was basically day one. This is going right after page builders. Gutenberg is going to replace page builders. That's the plan. That's what he was telling me, and I actually didn't see that at the moment. So my question is, we've got a lot of page builder users here. Is that can you address that? Is that the end goal, the end plan? Because, right now when you use Gutenberg, you don't have quite the design control today that you do out of Elementor or Beaver Builder or some of these tools. What can you talk about that just a little bit more to the audience here?
Sure. Yeah, the best analogy would be actually the customizer in WordPress. So prior to the customizer existing, every theme would implement all their theme options in a different way. And some had preview and some didn't. When we created the customizer, it allowed all themes to have a consistent place to put all of these options and things, and also provided a really nice benefit that you can kind of get a live preview of the changes you're making. I think of Gutenberg as very much the same way. And actually, the page builder developer community has been part of the conversation since day one. And we've even done some pretty fun hangouts with basically representatives from all the major page builders. And I want to say there were 10 or 12 there, and the Gutenberg lead developers. As a result of that, all of the major page builders I'm aware of have Gutenberg as part of their roadmap and can support and interop with it. And the beauty for users is going to be that where page builders each had proprietary implementations of many things before, the hope is that Gutenberg can provide a common framework, right? This fundamental building block of blocks that allow benefits to accrue across the builders, so that maybe even in the future there's a possibility to switch from one to another without having to rebuild your site from scratch. That's really what we try to do with Core, is take what users are doing and people have demand for, and create a version of it that allows the most interoperability, backwards and futures compatibility, and hopefully even expands the functionality. Another good example might be, and this is something Yoast would talk about, is Yoast is an SEO plugin, very popular, and all the page builders would bug them to add support for their page builder to like take all the Yoast text analyst tools and support whatever builder it was. This means that Yoast needs to support like a dozen page builders and rewrite code a dozen different ways to basically add Yoast support to these different builders. Now with the annotations API in Gutenberg, the Yoast team can write once to this API, and any page builder that supports that API will get Yoast for free. And so that's whether it's a big one or a brand new one that gets created. So these types of frameworks and foundations that people can build on, I think ultimately create a much better user experience and provide a lot more user choice and provide a lot more opportunity for the page builders to differentiate in the future. Just because there's free contact forms in Jetpack, for example, doesn't mean that there's still very, very successful commercial and free other contact forms, including Contact Form 7 on the free side and things like Gravity Forms on the paid side. There's built-in custom blocks or custom meta fields in WordPress, but advanced custom fields, ACF, is still very popular. So you definitely have something, even when we create kind of the baseline experience that we think is the 20% of functionality that is appropriate for 80% of users. That grows with WordPress pie as a whole. And then, people who want more than that, it essentially creates a market for people who want more than that, which is why I think I'm actually bullish on the future of page builders.
Well, that's great to hear the support of page builders and the recognition of what they've kind of allowed a certain group of WordPress users to do, and really, kind of makes having a nice website that can really just change your entire life more accessible. And I think that's ultimately the goal of WordPress, is to, regardless of your economic, your country, your language, or any of that, to have these opportunities. So I got one last question for you, and this ties into WordCamp coming up. Last year, and this is a personal opinion, last year I did actually watch the live stream. I watched when you were there and you talked about phase 1 and phase 2. And I kind of felt that at the wrap of last year, so prior to last year's WordCamp, I felt like there was an overall negativity or not excitement about the new content editor coming. And then I felt at the end, there was almost like for me, like a noticeable shift in the right direction of the perception, the excitement. This is coming. This is a good thing. And I really felt that that shift. It just happened. I don't know if you felt that where were from your vantage point, but from my vantage point, I clearly noticed that at the wrap of last year's WordCamp, even though I wasn't there. So what I want to ask you, and I'm going to go one day. I'll probably go next year. Next year, I want to actually do a lot of WordCamps. I've only been to a few every year, but I want to go out of my Southern California. Anyways.
Throw a party, by the way, for your birthday. Bring your family.
Well, I have my wife and son. They insist on going every place with me, which I do too. I want them with me always as well. So that would be the plan, to bring them with me. We're actually getting tickets to Berlin for the WordCamp EU that's coming up. So we're going to, as a family, go there. And I'm German, so I got family there anyway. But
it's really cool. Also, I love seeing kids at WordCamps, and a lot of camps, including WordCamp Miami, are doing some really impressive stuff, having like kid-only tracks where there's like an entire content track just for younger folks. And I'm always super inspired seeing a new generation start to adapt and develop things on top of WordPress.
It is. Just to go on a little tangent, my son is 12. And last year, every year they have to do a school project. And he told one of his friends about my YouTube channel. And for his school project, this boy watched one of my how to make a website videos, made a full website using WordPress. I mean, he's at that time 11, and he made it, and he turned that in as his project. That was the most humbling thing for me to see that happen. An 11-year-old watching the video using WordPress. I mean, that's just a humbling thing, But back to the question, I wanted to ask.
Don't stop.
What's that?
You got to keep doing it. Please don't stop.
Oh, yeah, I love what I do. Actually, it's been a huge blessing. But what I want, getting back to this question, I wanted to ask you, what do you hope to accomplish? Seeing as how last year there was this huge positive shift, in my opinion, and I don't think it's just me. But what do you hope to accomplish at the wrap of this year's WordCamp US? Like, what do you hope to accomplish there?
Well, it's good to see why last year there was such a palpable shift. And it wasn't because I got on stage and talked for an hour. It was because we did a live demo showing the real version of Gutenberg. And where prior to that, people had been talking about their ideas of what Gutenberg was, they got to see the reality of what it really was. So that's a lot of what we're going to focus on this year. Both show the reality of what Gutenberg is, not what the tweets are saying is right or wrong about it, or like these perceptions of ideas, which of course, news and online coverage does bias itself towards negative, not the positive. The story, man bites dog is more interesting than this dog bites man. So we're going to show a lot of things. We're going to show user tests. We're going to show blocks. We're going to show examples of what people are doing with Gutenberg. And we're going to show like some mock-ups and wireframes and ideas of what can come in the future. So we can begin discussing, having arguments and ideas and debates, but around the reality of what things are, not kind of the perception of what people might have, the idea of it. So that's what I'm personally really excited about. And I'd love for your audience to tune in and to continue the conversation afterwards. By the way, WordCamp US is just one day out of the year. It's one Saturday where I put on a suit and talk to the WordPress community. But I'm listening and talking to the WordPress community all year. And so anyone who ever wants to have a conversation or discuss how they're using WordPress, like I love to learn. I love to have those. And I'd be happy to reach out to people. I did some office hours over the past week, Thursday through Sunday, where I think there were 24 slots. So 24 different people told me about how they were using WordPress, how long they've been using WordPress, how they've tried Gutenberg, what they like about it, what they dislike about it. It was amazing. And it was kind of like a more formal version of what happens for me informally throughout the year. So if anyone that's watching this ever wants to share their experience of WordPress, drop me a note, send me a tweet. I'm Photomatt, Photomatt. Drop me an email, Matt@Mullenweg.com. All these sorts of things. I love to hear. I try to respond as much as possible, but even if I don't respond, know that I do read everything.
Well, for everyone listening, he's telling the truth. The way this getting him here was Matt wrote a blog post about Gutenberg, and I left a comment and I said, "Hey, I love what Gutenberg's doing. I love what you're doing. I want you to come over here and do what we're doing right now." And within probably, I would assume, the minute you read that, right when you were reading all the comments on your blog, you saw that and then shot me an email and made this happen. And I really appreciate that, first of all, and how fast you made it happen. And also you're sacrificing an hour of your time when you're probably obviously a busy person. You are leading a company with, was it almost 900 staff members, and you've got this big event coming up in a couple days, and you took aside time to come here and speak with the viewers here on YouTube. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to do that. And for anyone that's watching, in the video description box, and I'll also put it in the pinned comment, I'll put a link to the WordCamp US website where you can order you don't pay for anything. It's free. You're ordering something for no money to watch the live stream. And I'd really want to encourage you to do that and enjoy seeing the vision and the future of WordPress, which is pretty much going to be, for the most part, revealed in just a matter of days. So we're coming up on an hour. I did have one more question, but I'll skip it for maybe the next time. I wanted to thank you for coming on today. If there's any last words that you wanted to say, and then we could just wrap it up.
I'll just say thank you. Thank you to you for making this channel and reaching, I guess, millions of people per year. Thank you for leaving the comment, asking me to come on. I hadn't come across it before, so it was all new to me. And I was glad we were able to make this work. And finally, thank you to everyone watching. if you're a WP crafter, right, you're probably part of bringing other people into the WordPress world. And so much of the growth and success of WordPress is the result of someone sitting down and helping someone else get one going. It's what bridges over all of our usability problems is the amazing community of people who figured it out, and they sit down with someone else and help them figure it out. And I really appreciate that, and thank you for that contribution, because it's really part of what makes WordPress special. And yeah, thank you. I'm full of gratitude.
Well, hopefully we can get you back on at some point in 2019, maybe 4 days before the next WordCamp. Who knows? Maybe we can do it live as well and take on some live questions for the next time. So thanks for coming on, Matt. I really appreciate it. And I wish you I know it's going to be a great weekend for you. It's going to be a great weekend for WordPress. And I can't wait to be a live stream viewer this weekend. So thanks a lot. And as they say in show business, that's a wrap. Be sure to check out the upcoming WordCamp US State of the Word live stream. I'll have that link down below in the video description box and also in the pinned comment. Definitely do that. I'm going to be there watching myself. And if you've enjoyed this video, consider giving it a thumbs up. Don't forget to click on the subscribe button and the notification bell. And what would be really sweet is if you could take this video and share it on your social media networks. Hey, thank you for spending this time with me for this interview. I appreciate it, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.